someone I was speaking with told me that, when you got into a senior leadership role, then one of the questions that you were asked was 30, 60, what is your, as you get into this role, what is your 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan? How are you going to, come at this? How are you going to add value in the role? But specifically, in what's your 30, 60-day plan? Now, I thought that's a great question. And even that person thought that the way you responded to that was amazing. Um, and I think it's important because in a whole bunch of interviews, especially as you're climbing up, that's a question that you will get asked a whole bunch of times. And your response to that question could be a deciding factor of whether you qualify for that role. Of course, in your case, you were already in that role. But that could be the defining factor, kind of a make or break thing. So to me, that's a very important question. So how do you approach a question like, what's your 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan? Because you don't know too much about, you're just getting into it. What does the role require? What are the important things, the big rocks? You don't know that. So how do you attempt a question of that? What's happening in your mind when you respond to a question like that?
So yeah, I think that's a very good question. So when you're joining a new organization and you have to think of the 30, 60, 90-day plan, my personal view is that it is not about disrupting. It is about, it's a discovery phase for you, right? So it's about discovering and asking the right questions to see if there was certain reasons why certain things are not happening, or is it an oversight when a value add creation that can happen. So I specifically feel that it is when you come in, you've got a new starter lens things. I think that's a very, very valuable period, because before you become part of the system, you have to make observations, right? And share the observations in a positive fashion to understand the underlying reasons why certain gaps exist or certain opportunities are not being tapped.
Yeah.
So I think in a new role, it will be a lot about discovering, forming relationships, and finding areas wherein you should create value.
So how do you make these observations? Because you're also a new kid on the block, and everybody's viewing you as, oh, this is a new person. Let's see, there's a little bit of testing happening. Oh, she doesn't know the stuff. Maybe she's not the right fit. So how are you dealing with all of that?
So yeah, again, great question. So my view is, I think your listening skills are very, very important, right? So when you're forming relationships with people, more than talking, listening is very important. So I think listening, empathizing, and then putting your points across in a very polished fashion, which doesn't seem like challenging or threatening them, but more about being curious, asking questions, and putting points across wherein you identify differences, right? And let them see that, oh wow, it's a great idea, it's a great food for thought, rather than then feeling threatened by different thought process that you bring in. So I think it's an art of both listening and making observation of the differences or opportunities, and how you put them across plays a key role in becoming a trusted advisor vis-a-vis being seen as a threat.
So, if you can think of an example where you toned down the threat, you wanted to put something where there was a little bit of a difference in opinion, if you can, it's totally unscripted, this question, like most of the questions. So, what happened? You went there, this was a difference of opinion, this is what you asked, and you were aware that it could blow up, and the person might get defensive, but because you were careful of how you're coming across, that didn't happen and stuff, right? So and also I want to bundle a second question as you think through that also. Okay, when you're making your plan, you're saying, there are some observations and listening. And I'm saying listening will be in the context of some questions. So do you just walk up to a stakeholder and say, hey, I want to know more about so-and-so. Tell me about more, or, tell me what's your priority. And why I ask this question is because if I come to you and ask you a very direct question, Taru, how are you? Typically, everyone says, I'm fine. Even though at the back of the mind, they had a bad day, not slept too well, don't like your face, etc., etc. But the response is going to be, I'm fine. So what I'm really saying is sometimes, as I'm sure you've experienced, direct questions don't get you the real responses and the underlying root causes and stuff. So I bundled a whole bunch of things. What I'm really saying is, if you can think of an example of how we manage that, and or if you could tell me that, how do you go and make those observations? What are the kind of questions? What's the kind of approach? So whichever one you want to respond.
So, Greg, I think you made a very, very good point around the fact that if you ask very close-ended questions, you get very short and crisp answers back from certain individuals. So I think the first art is to ask open-ended questions, right? I think preparing for meetings, right? Even if it is just a one-to-one is very, very important, right? So by virtue of the role of a person, you would know where the overlap is, right? So introducing yourself in a right way so that there is some credibility that is set at the start of the conversation. Being curious in terms of the role the person is playing, how long the person has been with the organization, what is the person expecting of the role that you're going to play, will build some credibility and the relationship. And then coming to the point, asking about what are the challenges that they see, what are the things that are going well. So people of more than listening, I think people like to talk. So touching upon topics that may be of interest to them, right, so that they get to talk, express themselves. Because for you, more than talking, it is listening that is important, right? So I think preparation, asking open-ended questions, touching upon areas that the person may be passionate about. And some of it can't be prepared. Of course, at runtime, you have to pick the questions that you have to ask. But I think the first few conversations are very important in terms of understanding where the person is coming from and where the overlaps.
Yeah. I think being in the moment and things like that would be very important for that. So if you just keep this with you. Yeah. All right. So I think that could be very important. If you can just think back to a time, when you first joined up in this organization, something, and you were there. So how did you prepare? What were you asking yourself? And did you just go up to the person and say, so what are your challenges? How did you figure out what's, like you're saying, it's important to figure out what's important to this person. So how do you figure out, hey, this is like Greg sitting in front of you. What's important to this guy? What's the process of figuring that out?
So I think when you go into a conversation, you may, in the first conversation, you may know the title of the person. So you could start by introducing yourself and what the experience that you bring in, what is the role that you're going to play. And then you can ask that, I would like to understand more about the role. And I would like to understand that where we're going to overlap. Yes. So let that person talk what the role is all about. And then you could ask that, you're dealing with such a varied stakeholders. How do you manage that? So I think take to certain conversations wherein, there could be certain areas where you can express empathy, right? You can ask about the challenges that the person is facing. I think typically when you touch upon these two things, you will get the conversation going.
I think some powerful questions. So what is your role? Open-ended right there. And then going deeper, what are the overlaps?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that gets a person talking because you're not saying what's going on.
Yeah.
You're saying what are the overlaps?
Yes.
As soon as a person is saying, okay, this is my role, this is your role. Yeah, these are the overlaps. Because I'm also thinking that a whole bunch of times when the overlaps are happening, I'm thinking this is your role. You're thinking this is my role.
Yeah.
And there's this no man's land, no woman's land, kind of a space in the middle, and things begin to fall in the cracks. So I think that's a really nice question. And as a follow-up question, what's your role? And what are some of the overlaps? And I'm just saying, for people listening to this, straight out of the gate, I think there's value there. And the third one is, so what are your who are your stakeholders?
Yeah, so when you understand the role, you would know what are the sticky areas of that role, right? So empathizing on that sticky area for sure will get the person talking.
So some nice so what I've actually written down is 3 important questions that could help you respond to that 36, that could help you craft your 30, 60, 90-day plan, but I also think that it goes a little beyond that. And it moves more towards, a lot of times people ask you, how do you build enduring relationships?
Yeah.
This is the start of that. How do you build?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. See, this is to know people and build relationships so that eventually you get to know what is important to them.
Yeah.
Right? Your 30, 60-day plan will come eventually once you understand your ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right? So this is one step towards getting into new conversations, new relationships with people who are important stakeholders for you.
Yeah.
And once you know them better, their priorities, thereafter you will have enough food for thought to create your 30, 60, 90-day plan.
And then you're probably going back to them and checking,
Yes.
and seeing what. So I think, like you mentioned a little earlier, how do you close the loop and how do you go back and how do you
Yeah.